Hello everyone, I'm Dave Jones and welcome to session 10 of RMS online masterclasses. Now you'll note we've moved away from live webinars to this pre-recorded format. That gives me the opportunity to provide richer content and also to show you how the software looks and works on devices of different sizes. We want to keep it interactive, so I've put a link in the description. If you click on that link, you can fill out a form and ask your questions. Somebody will come back to you with the answers to those questions. You don't have to be a customer, don't even have to be a user. So today we're talking about the Guest Portal. Now we have talked about the Guest Portal in the past. Today we're specifically talking about how to automate the process of getting your guests to the Guest Portal. Now, if you missed the first memo, you might be saying, well, what exactly is the Guest Portal? And, maybe we've been talking about it for years and you're not even quite sure what it is. Well, let's go and have a look at that now. So every online retailer, online service or app usually has somewhere where the guest or the customer can log on. Here's my Amazon account and you can see I can see the last few things I've purchased. I can update my payment details, contact details, etc., etc. So that'd be your first option. You could have a generic link, a button somewhere on your website. People can come along, click on that button, go into the Guest Portal, do all the things they need to do. Now that doesn't particularly sound very automatic, but in this era where people aren't printing things out, we don't print out our receipts and carry around confirmations, all that sort of stuff. So for somebody to be able to go into the portal 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, be able to download their own invoices, statements, check dates, etc., change their payment details, extremely convenient. Now we'll go and have a look in a minute as to what the portal looks like. But for right now, if you wanted to use that link, there is no URL generator. You would need to go into the Help Center, type in Guest Portal, click on that link, scroll down till you find this link here, replace the X's at the end with your 4 or 5 digit client ID, hand that link to your web developer, he'll create a button on your website and off you go. Now, when someone uses that generic link, specifically that generic link that I've just showed you there, they do have to go through a very simple process, just a security thing, because, it's an open link and anyone could click on it. If they knew your phone number, they could enter your phone number. So I'll show you what's going to happen. So the guest will come here, they'll click on Let's Go. They'll be asked to enter a mobile phone number or an email address. They'll then click on Get My Access Code. That will send a 6-digit access code to their mobile device. They'll enter that code into their mobile device and that will bring them into the system. Now the first screen they'll see if they've never entered payment details is this screen here. We'll just click through this one at the moment, but we'll come back to it. Now you'll see in this example I'm being asked to enter some details about a pre-arrival, and that's because this guest has a reservation that's arriving soon, most likely today, and they're being asked to complete a pre-arrival. So there's nothing particularly clever that the guest needs to know. All they need to know is, I've gone into the Guest Portal, I'm being asked for some information, and they'll follow this process. Now I'm going to switch to a tablet, to an iPad, just because it's going to be a little bit easier for you guys to see what I'm doing, but the flow and all of the buttons are almost identical, just a little bit bigger. So let's go and have a look at that. Now, bear in mind everything I'm about to show you is highly customizable, so this is just an example. But in this example, we would click on pre-check-in. We would then complete this form. Now, I haven't made any of these other than pets mandatory, so we're going to complete the mandatory fields. You can see that I could ask them to upload an image, that might be a passport or whatever. And then we're going to get to this screen. Now, once again, this is highly customizable. And I'll just show you the examples there. See those two little conditions? Now, clearly, they're not standard conditions. They're ones we've put in. I'm going to show you how that works later. And then I've asked for a signature, which you can use a stylus, your finger, whatever. Then we've got like a little mini COVID declaration or a health declaration, and I'll show you how we can customize that as well. And we're just saying, look, nobody's got COVID in this example. It's asking me to complete the details of the other guests, which we can do as well. And then we'll just flow through the process. And eventually it's going to ask me to make a payment. And we could do that, but I'm not going to do that in this example. So how did we make all this happen? How did we set all this up? Let's go all the way back into RMS, have a little look at how we set this up with all of the different options and conditions that we can put into that so that your guests can have an experience like this. From there, we'll go on to show you how to automate the whole process. Let's go and have a look. Okay, so let's just have a quick review of what we've done so far. We've learnt what the guest portal is. It's just somewhere where guests can go and manage their own reservations. We've seen that we can apply a quick link via a button, say on our website or social media, that people can go to the guest portal. We've also had a quick look at the process the guests would go to do that pre-check-in process and some of the buttons, etc. on the guest portal. Now let's go and have a look how we'd set that whole thing up. Okay, so we're in the side menu. We've gone to Setup, down here to Portal Access, and the one down here, Guest Portal. And I'll just close that screen a little bit. It's going to open in the General Options tab. Now, the first thing we need to do is enable Guest Portal. You can now check and enable any of these options or leave them out. It's completely up to you. Messaging, yeah, that would be a very handy thing to have. Allow contacting the property, that would also be very handy. Some things like logos, etc., the greeting, etc. Go through all of those, decide which ones you want. Let's go up to accounting defaults. Are you going to allow credit card payments? You probably will. Do you want to charge a transaction fee? Once again, just go through these nice and quietly and choose the ones that you want. Showing breakdown of accounts can be handy if you're selling lots of different things, not just accommodation. And showing the deposit required would be a pretty handy thing if that's what you're asking the guest to do. Now let's go and spend a little bit of time in the check-in tab. And this is that process I was showing you just before, this pre-check-in or pre-arrival, whatever you like to call it. Now there's a couple of things we need to do if you want to use this. The first one is to enable pre-check-in, and then you can decide how many days in advance that somebody could do that. Typically, it's just going to be the day of arrival, but if you wanted to allow people to do it 2 or 3 days prior, absolutely no problem with that. You will need a letter that goes with all of this, and you just need to create a letter, and we won't go through all of that, but it's just another letter, and it's not going to have a heap of arrivals and departures and all that sort of stuff, because all of that is in the guest portal itself. This is really more just a letter, just maybe explaining things to customers, what they should expect, something about the property, etc., etc. And then you'll want a confirmation text, which is at the end of the process so that people know what's going on. You'll need a payment condition, and you can see that there are several there, and just depends on what you like to do. Maybe you just want a deposit, maybe you want the whole thing taken, or projected account balance, and we'll talk about that in a minute as well. And it's not a bad one to use, I have to say. And then you can decide which of the travel agents that you deal with are allowed to use that payment condition and those that are excluded. You'll see the next tab up here, digital check-in settings. Ignore that. That's if you're using an iPad or something on arrival. Additional information. Now, this is kind of handy. Now, this is when we talked about the health declaration before, and the sort of the whole COVID-19 thing, you know, with any luck at all, that's behind us now. But just in case, and so if you want to disable the COVID-19 declaration, just turn that on, and that turns it off. Now, normally, if it was turned on, you would have, 7 or 8 questions down here, and this whole enable past locations, rah, rah, rah. Now, I don't think anybody's doing that anymore, but if you wanted to, you could. What I have done is not disable this, and I've just asked one very basic question: are all members of your party in good health? Yeah, it's not a bad sort of a thing to know. You might want, just depending on your property type, where you are, the customers you have, etc., you might want them to upload a passport or a photo or something like that. You can do all those things here as well. Now, check in. So this is the next stage. Now, do you want the guest to actually be able to check themselves in? And I guess if you particularly want somebody to come to reception and you want to eyeball them and you want to have that conversation, then probably you don't want them to check in. But if maybe you've got electronic locks, they don't necessarily need to come to reception, then maybe you would allow them to actually check themselves in. Let's go down. We'll keep going down. Checkout's pretty obvious. Do you want them to do that? Once again, completely up to you. You might like to put some images up here that's used within the digital registration. External links. Okay, so let's just say, and we'll have another look at the portal later on, and we'll see that you can display links to other things, and that might be things to do in the area. It might be other businesses that you partner in with, etc. So people can have a quick link to those other things. We've seen general options. This says how much information that people can put in their guest profile and how much they can edit that. Once again, completely up to you. This one's quite important and handy. So when you first start using the guest portal, you're going to get notifications when people do things. Now, after a while, you get sort of notification overload and you're not paying any attention to them anyway. But just in those first couple of days and weeks that you're using the guest portal, particularly for the pre-check-in, you might just want to know that it's working. And one great way to know that it's working is if people are pressing the buttons and doing all the things, and you'll be notified as that goes along. So not a bad thing to maybe leave some of these open. So preferences is something that's bespoke to certain types of businesses. It's for people who are going to provide different types of furniture and things like that. It was done for a specific group of properties. You're probably never going to use it. You could use it to say, do you want twin beds or queen beds, whatever. I would probably just pass straight over preferences. Requirements, on the other hand, is the opportunity for you to sell extra things, late checkouts, porta cots, but it might be meals, it might be tours, it could be anything, and they can be sold via the guest portal as well. There's a few settings here that you might want to have a look at. One of those is down here, show projected balance, that we talked about. Now, if you don't know what projected balance is, it's another balance amount that is shown on the reservation, and it includes everything. So it's going to include the rates, any sundries that you might have sold the person, deposits, discounts, etc. Adds and subtracts the whole thing and comes up with one figure that is the total balance. And it's not a bad idea, if people see that they might be inclined to pay the full amount rather than just the deposit that you're asking for. In terms and conditions, now remember we looked before at a couple of little special conditions I had set, and this is where you can put them. And as well as your normal terms and conditions, so everything that you want to say to people about, what your terms and conditions are, you can also have up to 5 special conditions just for your property. And you can see that I've added one as an example, just to let customers know that there's no lifeguard, that they're swimming at their own peril. And they actually have to tick that box to move on. If they don't tick the box, you're going to get a notification in the message center that they didn't tick the box, and maybe you can take that up. So if you've got special little things at your place that are just a little bit different to everyone else, you can make people acknowledge that you told them about it. So not a bad thing. Let's just quickly go into setup again, and I'm going to go to accounting, and I'm going to go to accounting options. And I'm going to go to account screen, and you can see down the bottom there, show projected balance. So that projected balance won't show in RMS at all until you've checked that box. Okay, so once you've done all of that setup, this is something like what the guest portal is going to look like. Now, bear in mind, I've turned on just about every feature here, so there's a lot of information to take in. Chances are you're not going to use all of those features, but let's go through them. Let's start at the top. We've got our home button. Our reservations, the guest can create a new reservation from the guest portal. Invoices, we can see all of the invoices that have been created for this guest, and you can email them to yourself or reprint them, whatever you'd like to do. The profile, We can add a credit card, add payment details, or we can edit the profile. Now, how many fields that are accessible to the guest is determined by you, and that is done, and I'll show you where all that happens. We've got one here called information, which is all of those things that you would want people to know about your business, and I'll show you in a moment where you set all that up. You can buy a gift card in the guest portal now. You can set that all up in the gift card area. You can also sell a pass. Now, a pass is for maybe you have sell four-wheel drive passes, maybe you have access to national parks, those sort of things. You can sell those passes from here as well. Let's go back home. So one of the first things we can do is make a payment. Now, that will either be the deposit you've asked for, or perhaps people want to pay the full amount. We saw in the previous screen where we can set all of that up. Next one is we can add people to the guest list. We can just add those in there. We can cancel a booking. You know, that may not be one that you want to allow, but you certainly can. And I got to say, it does save just one more phone call. If they're going to cancel, let them do it themselves. Completely up to you. Preferences, I talked about that before, and I sort of said, look, maybe that won't apply to you. There are creative ways in which you can use preferences, and maybe these are some of the ways that you'd like to use them. So that's preferences. Extras, all of the different things that you have at your business that you might like to sell from here. They can just add that onto their reservation. The pre-check-in, and we saw how easy that was. And if you were arriving today, and I'm going to show you in a minute how you're going to notify people to do their pre-check-in automatically, you would simply go through that process. You can message the property. Simply, it's just like doing a text message, and you would be able to communicate with the property. Over here in options, all sorts of things, contact us, your terms and conditions. You can print or email a statement or an invoice. So that's all the things you can do in the guest profile. So you can see it's a pretty handy thing to have. If you've got it set up properly and it sort of looks really funky, people will use it and will save you a lot of time. Now, remember, we talked just a moment ago about all of those extra bits of information about your property. This is where you put all of that. It's in the side menu under Setup, Online Bookings, Online Options, and then in the Extra Information tab. And you can just simply put all of your information in there and it will show up on the guest portal. The number of fields that are available to the guest in their guest profile in the guest portal are under, in the side menu, Setup, Users, Field Maintenance. Then just click on, in here it's labelled Client Portal, but it's Guest Portal. Just put a check in the box next to the fields you want the guest to have access to. And if they're mandatory fields, then you can put a tick in this column here, if that's something that you insist that they complete. Okay, so just a quick reminder, in the description below there's going to be some information. There's going to be that generic link that we set up before so that you can add a button to say social media or your website. There'll be links to help documents that pertain to everything we've discussed today. And there'll also be that link to a form that you can complete. Ask any questions you like about what we've talked about today, and somebody will come back with an answer. You might also like to subscribe and ring the bell so you get notifications of when new videos come out. And just for me, you might like to click the like button. So the main way you're going to automate this whole process is by using text messages and triggered correspondence. I've started by creating a text message that is customized to the guest. So I've used lots of merge fields such as given, such as property name, such as res number. That's going to give the guest who receives this text message a lot of confidence that it is a real text message that came from you and not some sort of scam. And there is a great prevalence of that out in the world today, so people are a little bit nervous. But if you reassure them in that way, and the most important merge field I've used is this one here right at the end, which is the link to the guest portal. And to find that, I've gone to reservations, and then I've gone, and I'm just going to use the search facility there, And you'll see I've got Guest Portal, and I've got a few different options. And it just depends on whether you're setting up a property that's part of an enterprise or just a single property. If it's a single property, you're going to use this one here, Guest Portal, short URL. But if it's an enterprise, you're going to use this one up here. Now, you'll notice down here in the character count that I've already blown out the number of characters for a single text message. So this one's going to definitely be 2 messages. And by the time the merge fields like given and property name are filled out, it's going to be even bigger. So don't even try to get it at 1. But, if the 7 or 8 cents, the second text message cost is going to be the difference between winning and losing, you probably got a whole different problem, not just using the Guest Portal. So don't worry about it. Just make sure you've got a really good text message that people understand and that they'll be able to relate to. So we can save and exit out of there. Now, while we're in the correspondence section, I've just gone over to form letters. Now, where you've created the letter that is going to be connected to the Guest Portal so that it displays the information you want to collect. One thing that might be very, very handy is if you want to collect a digital signature. Now, you'll see that under the Guest Merge Table group, I've got one here called Digital Rego Signature. If you put this merge field into the letter that you're using for the Guest Portal, the recipient will be able to sign that. So if it's on their mobile phone, they'll probably use their finger. If it's on their iPad or whatever, they'll probably use a stylus or a pencil. You could even use your cursor if it's on a computer. So that's probably a really handy one. That will be stored against the reservation. So you can actually have a real digital registration signature that you can see and retain. Now, under triggered correspondence, we need to set up that rule so that it's going to send that text message out automatically. So we'll start off with a name. Let's call it something like this. Then we need a rule. Now, you could send this out prior to check-in if you wanted to. I think a really good way to do it is at a specific time of day, probably about 10 o'clock in the morning, and on arriving today. So it's only going to go once. It's only going to go out when a reservation is arriving. So everyone who was arriving, say, today, is going to get that text message at 10 o'clock. And it's not a bad time, maybe people who are driving, the spouse is sitting in the passenger seat completing this, maybe, at the airport lounge, just quietly filling it out on a bus, whatever. The delivery method will be a text message, and we're going to choose that text message we just created earlier. Date filters is going to be all the time, I should imagine. I can't imagine a time when you wouldn't want to use this. It's going to go to people who have arrived. You can take the tick out of that box if you like, but definitely confirmed and unconfirmed. You can send it to the primary guest or additional guests as well. And there may be some inclusions. Maybe, you don't want this to go to some of the guests that come from certain travel agents or different companies or whatever. Maybe, you want to exclude some people, so you can do that here. And that's all you have to do, and you've automated that whole process. So just before I sign out, I want to quickly touch on checkouts, and we did mention it briefly before. Maybe you've got the sort of business where checking out is a big deal, and maybe you want to collect payment, say goodbye to the folks, all of that sort of stuff. But for a lot of businesses where the payment is either collected prior to arrival or at arrival, maybe it's not such a big deal to actually speak to the guests, and you want to automate that as well. So in the same way we did the pre-arrival, you can trigger a text message to go out and to remind the guest that perhaps checkout time is 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock, whatever it happens to be, and to click on the link where they can check themselves out. Once that happens, you can trigger all sorts of things off the back of that. Maybe you send out NPS reports. Maybe you send out a thank you email. Maybe housekeeping needs to be notified, etc., etc. So it's not a bad idea to do that. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that's it. It's really that simple to set up and something I really encourage you to use. And some of the reasons you would want to use the guest portal, and particularly that pre-check-in process that people go through. And if you've ever checked into a hotel or any sort of accommodation, you get asked all of these inane questions. It's tap, 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 another inane question, tap, 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 click, 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 clickety, click, click, click. You're standing there like a goose. It takes forever. You've just, flown across the country. All you want to do is get your key, check in, and get to the room, maybe have a beer, something like that, and you're being asked all these stupid questions. If folks can do that, and they happily do, I mean, we all use self-check-ins, we all use, fill our own cars with fuel, all that sort of stuff. We're very happy about serving ourselves if it's efficient. People want to do it. What they don't want to do is, form a queue out the reception window waiting for you to check them in. So it's a great thing. People want it. We're living in that age where people do want to serve themselves. So thoroughly encourage you to get that set up. Hopefully you're armed with enough information now so that you know how to do that. But remember, links to the help files below, ask a question in the form below, blah, blah, blah. So ladies and gentlemen, that's all I have to say about today's topic. I hope you'll come back next time to session 11, where we're going to take another deeper dive into dynamic pricing, yielding, all that sort of stuff. I'm sure you'll get something out of it, and I hope you'll come along. See you next time. Bye-bye.